What? For what? Where I went to school?
No.
FN.
Yeah.
Not where I went, my kids. Yeah, yeah, FN. Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our Tuesday, October 29th, 2024 Board of Education meeting. We are calling the meeting to order, and it is 7:03 p.m. And if everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. A reading of meeting notice. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provision of the Act, the Verona Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published in the Star Ledger, posted with the Township of Verona and the Verona Education Association. Posting of the meeting setting forth the time, location, and agenda were posted at the Verona Board of Education office and on the Verona Public Schools District website. Copies of tonight's agenda and resolutions have been made available to the public via the Board of Education website. Mr. Cruz, if you could please call attendance.
Mr. Walker,
Here.
Mrs. Frizella,
Here.
Mrs. Farrar, Mrs. Prisco,
Here.
Mr. Boone.
Here.
We have quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to our resolution. I need a motion, please, to approve our routine matters, our minutes from our October 15th, 2024 meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Boone, seconded by
I'll second.
Mrs. Farrar. Any discussions? Seeing none. Mr. Cruz, if you could please call roll.
Mr. Walker,
Present. Yes.
Mrs. Frizella,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrar,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes,
Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
thank you. Let Ryan go. Okay, sure. I'm going to switch over and we're going to start with our student report by Mr. Ryan Brook. Thank you.
Good evening. October is coming to a close, which marks the end of the school year's first quarter as we approach November. The latter half of this month has brought about a multitude of accomplishments, activities, and events for VHS. On Thursday, the 31st, Halloween, VHS and the Student Council will be hosting a Halloween parade and costume contest. Students of all grade levels are encouraged to participate and dress up. This Friday, November 1st, marks when registration for AP exams is due. In May, VHS will be administering AP exams to registered students. Students who take AP exams and score well could earn placement and/or credit at colleges and universities. Parents and students are strongly encouraged to register and pay for such exams online by the 1st of November to avoid late fees. As November approaches, the fall sports seasons have begun to come to a close. The fall sports season for Verona has inarguably been has seen great performances across the board from a myriad of VHS teams, including girls tennis, soccer, and volleyball, among others having advanced to counties and seeing success. Our fall athletics programs have showcased the dedication and excellence of our students. Despite seasons coming to a close, VHS still has some fight left with remaining boys soccer matches, cross-country meets, and football playoffs, which are bound to be exciting. Speaking of football, I'd like to congratulate Michael Gerges, a senior on the football team, who was awarded this year's Stephen DeGreggio Young Man of the Year by the New Jersey Super Football Conference. Michael's hard work, dedication, and character have earned him this incredible recognition, exemplifying the rigor of VHS student athletes. In the world of performing arts, the VHS Marching Band last Saturday had competed at Rutgers University for the Bands of America New Jersey Regional Championship, garnering a second placement for the single A competition group for the region, but impressively also having the third highest score in the country among all bands in the same competition group. Bands of America is one of the largest and most prestigious high school marching band circuits in the country, conducting regional, super regional, and national championships where the largest programs and top bands of the country compete. This Sunday, November 3rd, the VHS Marching Band looks forward to competing in the New Jersey Marching Band Directors Association State Championships at the College of New Jersey. Like the prior meeting, I will be dismissing myself early to attend rehearsal and preparation for this upcoming event. This Friday, November 1st at 6 p.m., the VHS Spotlight Players are proud to present the Fall Cabaret performance, Broadway Throughout the Ages. The cabaret is a collection of musical pieces performed by our very own talented VHS students, with this year's performances following the theme of Broadway pieces from various eras. Come see the cabaret at the VHS Auditorium, and house opens at 5:30. Performances start at 6. Lastly, the VHS Homecoming has unfortunately been canceled and will no longer take place this year. However, the Student Council plans to move forward with a winter formal with a date and theme to be determined. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. 3 things. First, the 3rd place on the band, that's awesome. If you live where I live for as long as I've lived there, you get to hear every part of the band repertoire,
Yeah,
and they're always great.
thank you so much.
I also want to commend Mr. Gerges. I've gotten to know him over the years. He's a really good boy. So I'm happy that he got that recognition.
Mhm.
And last, you talked about a costume party.
Yes.
Will you reveal what costume you were dressed as for this year?
Say no. You can say no.
Okay, well, your secret's safe here. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Waka. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Thank you.
Sorry.
Friday.
Friday.
This Friday.
Friday,
Yeah.
this Friday.
Mhm.
Thank you, Ryan. And good luck at practice and good luck this weekend as well.
Thanks, Ryan.
Moving on to our agenda, we will now go to our superintendent's report by Ms. Di Giuseppe.
And since Dr. Miller and the curriculum team are here to do the NJSLA Access for Ls and DLM report, I'm going to keep mine brief, and also Ryan stole a lot of my stuff. So yeah, so in addition to the Verona High School marching maroon and white taking 3rd place nationally, there were 3 Southern California, a New Brunswick, and a St. Louis, Missouri competitions, and in our size, which we are A, we were 3rd in the nation in terms of our points. So it's really, and Mr. Lynch will remind me that they have a very limited budget. I look at it thinking it's not really all that limited, but I guess for as far as marching bands go, it's limited. So they do a lot with a little, and just want to accolades to the kids. They also came in 2nd at the Randolph competition and 2nd at the West Orange competition as well. So good luck to them on Sunday in the state finals. Our high impact tutoring is up and running and in progress, and a preview Summer Splash will return this summer. We had been using ESSER funds, and with the exhaustion of those funds, Summer Splash went away. But Dr. Miller and Mr. Cruz and I talked a little bit about how we utilize Title I funds, and we are going to reallocate Title I funds to bring the Summer Splash summer remediation program back. And they are Title I funds are, while they fluctuate year to year, they're more stable, unlike ESSER funds had an ending to it. So to update the board on any changes to the HBW schedule, we are on target to have a schedule change in place for September. It is, I was updated on it today. Mr. Galbercheck, Mrs. Ackerman, and Mrs. Peter presented to the rest of the group the final schedule configuration. Next steps are to present it to the HBW staff and then the board. And then we will run parent information sessions as well. I just want to thank the curriculum team that's here tonight, Mrs. Ackerman, and the administration at HBW for coming up with what I think this board, I'm not going to talk too much about it because I need to tell the teachers about it first. What is a win-win-win-win-win for everyone, and the creative minds that came up with this schedule, I'm very, very impressed. So thank you. Half of them are over there. And the elementary principals and met with the district administrators last Friday to discuss a common block schedule for the elementary school as well. We are actually pushing that out to hopefully try to get it in by September 26th. And the reason why we're going 2 years out on that one is that we don't know what Verona Flats impact will be on our elementary schools. So we're going to hold off on changing a schedule until we know whether we have to change configurations of our schools. So if we need to move boundary lines or change to grade band schools in order to accommodate what really is unknown, right? So the folks from the what's the name of the company, Pam? Conifer. I was thinking Pine Tree. Conifer. The gentleman from Conifer did say a lot of the applicants were from Verona. So their kids are already in our schools, but whatever property they vacate to move in to is, could bring families into the community. So we really don't know the impact, even though we had the demographic study done. So we're going to wait on making any big changes to the schedule until after we see that impact. And I will turn it over to Dr. Miller, Mrs. Peter, Mr.
Well, can we
Stevenson,
ask a
and Mrs.
question about
Fuller.
your report
Oh, yeah,
first?
sure. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Sure.
So, I think we all agree that the last resort is to change boundaries,
Correct.
so I want to make that clear. And if you could ask Kyle, because I don't know what a board's responsibility is as far as how it would go about the process of if we get to this scenario that we don't want to get to, that we should still at least prepare for it, right? So let us know what the board's responsibility is if you have to redistrict, how many votes it's going to take, or what any other things, because I've never experienced this.
Okay.
That's my only thing.
I will do that. Thank you.
And one other thing to follow Mr. Walker, in any configuration or any setup, is transportation going to be an issue? And if so, do we have any sense of what that would look like?
We'd have to really take a look at what we would have to do. Let me answer the question is yes, it would. But we would have to split the community in half and do a K2, 3-5, K2, 3-5, or you would wind up paying for transportation because you would have some boundaries. I mean, it's in, what are we, 3 square miles? Yeah, so we would probably have some potential need for busing. But it wouldn't be cost effective for us to have buses. It would be cost effective for us to reimburse parents the way we do currently with some of our parents that drive to approved special education schools, et cetera, because busing is hard. So we have to really do an in-depth study as to what that would look like. And optimally, it's keeping it as it is and neighborhood schools, because that's what the community likes. We understand that. I just don't know, aside a referendum and adding on to our buildings, because right now Lanning does not have an extra classroom. We have 24 and 24 in kindergarten there, and could not even split it if we wanted to because there's no classroom space. The only place we actually have and same at Forest. Forest has no extra classroom space. So the only place we have extra classroom space is Brookdale. And we are over capacity at HBW.
Just throwing it out there. Do we know if there's any vacancy if we had to rent out I'm just throwing ideas out there, but I like the idea of like an early learning center for pre-K or for kindergarten or something like that. And I agree that, we do in Verona really like the neighborhood elementary school setup. And because of that, we want to do everything we can not to change it because we do like it, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best setup, but it's something that I think we want. So that's it.
Yeah, it's definitely in most communities that have, my own community has neighborhood schools. My community my son grew up in had neighborhood schools, and people were very, they like that. Instructionally, grade band schools are significantly more effective, but that's not the reason we're moving to that thought. We have no space in our schools, and we have the potential of 100 or so kids coming into district.
Is the, the church school, it was called the Trinity, what's it?
Our Lady Lake.
Our Lady of the Lake, do we know if they even have vacancy if we needed
I
it?
don't, but I can look into that. I'll give,
Thanks.
Mr. Conroy a call.
I think also just while we're on this topic, you know, we know that we have obviously Verona Flats coming in, but we also know that there is a round 2 coming.
There is a round 2
Right.
coming.
So I think when we are talking about discussing massive changes to, you know, potential massive changes, right? We have to also consider the fact that this is not the first, right? We have a lot of things, and I think that this just reinforces the importance of the board being a part of these conversations with the town so that we are able to make these decisions, because we've been talking about this for a year because we don't have a lot of the information. So it's very difficult for us to make decisions when we don't have that information. So again, I'm reiterating publicly that it's really important that we have these conversations and these opportunities to, you know, collaborate with the town council so that we can make the most educated decisions that we can.
Well, and the township just received numbers from the state that are much higher than they expected with regard to what we have to provide going. You know, they're going to appeal it, and they'll talk more about that at the council meeting. I think they have to appeal it because most of what's available to build in our community is open space. So they're going to have to appeal. It was 157, right? Is that what they said? So 157 more units.
Right, and I do think that the town is, if I recall from when I looked at the last town council meeting, they were doing some changes to local regulations to allow commercial and then 2 or 3 levels of apartments above. Don't quote me if it's 2 or 3, where right now I think it has to be an equal number. So, which is going to increase capacity, even if absent open space. So I think it is something that Ms. Ferrer, you know, is right to make everyone aware that this is not a one and done solution, that we may need to look to expand some of
Can I
places.
jump in on that? So if the board president and the super agree, can we ask the Cara Rubino to let us know which structures, maybe even know this, Jorge, which structures are build upable and which some schools might have no space where you could build, other schools might actually have space that we could build if we had to, but just to get that info might help as well. There.
Where do we know where we are at the Spectrum 360 site?
Yeah.
Still in litigation? Okay,
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
okay, thank you. Without
Thank
further
you.
ado, I asked Dr. Miller to wheedle it down to, 85 slides from 185.
Very funny. It's less than 100. So we would like to, we're waiting for this to come up. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure for us to be here and to share information with you. All right, so we're gonna back up. There we go. Let's make sure that this works. Okay, so we're going to present to you access for ELS, DLM, dynamic learning maps, and the NJSLA results from the spring from 2024. And our mission for the district is to empower our students to cultivate their intellectual curiosity and social responsibility. I'd like to call up Ms. Alarcolo.
So we're going to begin this evening by looking at the results of our access assessment. The access assessment is the annual exam that our students who are multilingual learners take. It tests their proficiency in listening, reading, writing, and speaking. It is a nationally normed assessment, and New Jersey was one of the first states to begin giving the access test. So here you will see the results. We are proud that our students overall made growth in their speaking scores from the previous year to this year. We still notice that students do perform more strongly with reading and with listening because those are both receptive areas, and are still struggling a bit with writing and with speaking. So we are really focusing on those two domains. And how we're doing that is, one, implementing the Champion curriculum, which is our curriculum that we're using for our multilingual learners. We're implementing that with Fidelity. We are also meeting with general education teachers who have multilingual learners in their classrooms and going over the WIDA can-do descriptors, which talk about what students are able to do in each domain and then their next area of growth. We were also very fortunate. A group of us had the opportunity to attend a 3-day sheltered English instruction professional development with Barbara Tedesco and Dr. BJ Franks, who are truly experts in the field. So we learned so much from that training, and we're eager to share back what we learned with our colleagues who have multilingual learners in their classroom. We also this year have had more students join us in the upper grades who are new to English, which we were very excited about. And so both their general education teachers and our ML teacher are working hard to ensure they have translation tools available to them, so that we're still providing them with a rigorous curriculum and access to grade level standards, but also able to have tools for them to translate documents into their native language so they can better understand. So that's what we've been working on in terms of our multilingual learners. I'm now going to just speak very quickly to our dynamic learning map. For those who don't know, our students who have more significant learning and cognitive needs do participate as per their IEP team in the dynamic learning map, which is also known as the DLM. We had 13 students take that assessment this past year, both students who are in district and then a few students who are out of district. We had 13 students in total. And that tests students in ELA and math and science. It tests 3rd through 8th graders in ELA and math, as well as 11th graders. And then in science, our 5th, 8th, and 11th graders take that assessment. So there are 4 levels that students receive a score on. The test is administered one-on-one in what is called testlets, and the special education teacher works one-on-one with the student, gives them an assessment, they take a break, and then they take more over a few-week period. So you'll see the results here. They're either emerging, approaching target, at target, or advanced. When we receive the scores, we then meet with the special education teachers and give them the breakdown of the specific skills where the students have strengths and then areas of growth so that they can target those areas in their small group instruction. I'm now going to pass it over to Ms. Peter, the Supervisor of Humanities, who's going to speak about our NJSLA ELA results.
I don't know that I'll be quite as quick as Ms. Kohler, but I will try. All right, I'm going to go ahead and kick off our NJSLA portion of the presentation. This is the score breakdown. This applies to our ELA and math NJSLA assessments. That 750 number is key. That's the number that we'd like students to hit in order to meet expectations. I'm going to be focusing on the ELA portion, and I'll begin with our elementary schools. This first graph that you'll see, and you'll see this graph come up again and again in our middle school and high school portions, displays the averages of our NJSLA results over the last 3 years, beginning in 2022 to 2024. We like to see that green bar grow, and you'll see here in 3rd grade, it has been. That's a wonderful sign of the hard work that our teachers and students are putting in.
You're
Same
gonna see
here.
The blue and the red shrink.
Yes. Yes. And as that green bar grows, hopefully that's happening on the other end. Yes. And here we have our 4th grade results over the last 3 years. Here are our disaggregated results. You'll see that also in our middle school and high school portions. In our disaggregated graphs, you'll see our scores broken down by gender, race and ethnicity, socioeconomic status, classified status, students that have IEPs or 504s, and whether a student is a multilingual learner. You'll notice some blank spots across these results. Those are for student groups that are under 10. We do not report on student groups under 10. Here are our 3rd grade results. Our 4th grade results. Here in this graph, you'll see how Verona compares to the state in 3rd and 4th grade. You'll see here that our green bars are higher than our state's green bars. That's a good sign. I'd be remiss here not to thank Julie DiGiacomo, who did some really excellent work with our 3rd and 4th grade teachers last year that nudged those green bars higher. Our teachers put in a lot of work, and so did she, and I'd like to thank her for that in my absence. Here we have our current fifth graders. This cohort model gives us a really nice look at how students grow across the years. This helps us to compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges. So these are our current fifth graders when they were in third grade, and then when they were in fourth grade, you'll see that that group of students continues to improve. To continue to support the really great work that's happening at our elementary level, we'll continue to lean into Foundations and Heggerty as our word study programs. We'll continue that work in fourth grade as well. Our K1, 2, and now third grade teachers have all been trained and retrained, I should say, in Foundations over the last couple of years. We're leaning into our DRA, Acadians, Map Growth, and NJSLA scores to help students inform instruction through data. We continue to work with our reading coaches, particularly in letters training over the last couple of years. We also have been working hard at unpacking standards, writing really effective, specific learning targets. And that's all work that all of our teachers are doing, but particularly at the elementary level, it is challenging when you're teaching multiple subject areas. And I'd like to commend our elementary teachers for leaning into that work across content areas. Moving along to HBW, here we have our fifth grade averages over the last 3 years, some really impressive growth here. Our sixth grade averages. Our seventh grade averages also extremely impressive here as well. And our eighth grade averages. Here we have our disaggregated results in fifth grade, in sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade. Here we have our fifth and sixth grade students in comparison to the state. Our seventh and eighth grade scores in comparison to the state. Here we have our current sixth grade students when they were in third grade, fourth grade, and then fifth grade. We see continued growth there as well. Our current seventh grade students also continuing to grow. Our current eighth grade students who saw extremely impressive growth from our return to testing post-pandemic.
So can I just interrupt for 1
Yep,
second?
absolutely.
So for those people out there that are not used to seeing these presentations and they're watching or they'll be watching tomorrow, the tape of this, we look at two different things. We look at fourth grade to fourth grade, and that gives us information, this current fourth grade to next year's fourth grade or last year's fourth grade. That tells us about our curriculum, right? Gives us indications about whether or not we are hitting the right information. Looking at a cohort shows you a student from third grade, how they did, into fourth grade, how they did in fourth grade, into fifth grade, and how they did. So that shows you individual, the learning that our students are growing across those grade levels. That's why you're getting the two different slides of fourth to fourth, third to third, and then third, fourth to fifth.
And I know this is a lot of data to take in, so please know that this presentation will be posted and you are welcome to take a closer look at your child's specific grade band or across, where your child is headed over the next couple of years. So please, know that this is available and we're always happy to answer additional questions. Here we have our current ninth grade students. Again, we're continuing at HBW to lean into professional development. We this year made some tweaks to our WIN and more specifically our literacy lab to support areas of need. Under our new much anticipated HBW schedule, we'll continue to prioritize intervention as well. Teachers at the middle school are continuing to unpack the standards, write really effective and rigorous learning targets. They are working with data more than ever before, and I'd really like to commend them for this work. It's not an easy lift. It's different than what they've done in the past, and it's not easy. And they've gone ahead and taken it.
Great.
Yeah, they really have. And we transition to our high school. These are our ninth grade results, our disaggregated results at VHS, our scores in comparison to the state. Really a bright spot there. These are our current 10th grade students. Also at the high school, we're leaning into our district professional development around unpacking and writing learning targets. We continue to review those school evidence statements, especially given the new standards in ELA this year. We're leaning into which pieces of our curriculum we can improve to meet those standards. We've already updated our curriculum to reflect those new standards, but really to make sure our teachers have a good understanding of the slight changes and the broader changes is very important, and we're continuing that work throughout this year.
Most of the changes for ELA are at the lower grades though, right?
Yes, most of the major changes are at the lower grades, and for our technical standards, our ELA standards that are applicable in the content areas like science and social studies. Here in this chart, you will see our average scaled score. So that's that 750 number that I referred to in the beginning of the presentation that signifies a student meeting or exceeding standards. In comparison to the state, we are Verona maroon. The state is blue. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand over our presentation to Mr. Stevenson to speak about math and science.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. No, that's okay.
Thank you so much. I see some of that growth. I love that we're starting to use data. I think we're doing some really great things. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I noticed, and I apologize if I'm wrong, because I was kind of just stood out to me that throughout the grades, it seems like males are really underperforming.
Yes.
Right, compared, and I think it's fabulous for our girls. Like they're doing amazing.
National
right?
trend.
National trend.
Yes, and this used to be something that we really saw in ELA. We're seeing some of that in math and sciences as well. Yes, definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, so I just want to, I asked this last year, and I understand it's a national trend, but what have we went in to see like, and then did like an inventory of our libraries to see, you know, if we have those selections for males, like what books are we offering them? Are they reading at the same rates as our girls are in school? And I understand that this is, I'm not asking us to collect that data to see what I'm really just, don't worry, I'm not asking for that. But what I am asking for is, do our classroom libraries offer options for our boys to read as well? Do
Yeah,
we
and
have
you're
any of that?
you're speaking more at the elementary, middle school level.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. In
Yes.
classroom, like in the classroom,
Classroom
they're getting their
libraries.
independent reading. What does that look like? Have we ever done an inventory to make sure that we're offering diverse books? You know, books for girls and, you know, everyone.
I can't say that we've done a formal district-wide inventory. That was actually something that I did at the middle school when I taught 6th grade of my own personal classroom library, more as a reflection point for myself. And it was surprising to me, some of the groups that I thought I had better text that I didn't, or, you know, there were a few key titles, but maybe not the same quantity as some of the other groups. So it's definitely something we can be more mindful of, and something that we can assess throughout
Yeah,
our
just
elementary and middle
continue
school
to-
libraries.
'cause
Yeah,
if
and I
it's
think
something
we,
that we can purchase or add to, or just make sure
Yeah,
those libraries. are
absolutely.
written
we're
well.
actually looking at programmatic changes anyway,
Yep.
for the K-5 group.
Yep.
And Mrs. Peter and I were talking today about, what was the one we were talking about?
Wit and Wisdom is
Wit and
one
Wisdom.
program that's
Yeah.
out there. Yep, there's several, and we've been looking, you know, to begin our committee work that will actually kick off this week at our Halloween PD and continue throughout the rest of the school year. But that's a big consideration.
It is a
that
big consideration.
that the
what
texts that are included in programs, you know, are not only diverse to be representative of all the students, but certainly by gender. And when we do see data like this, it's something in particular to keep our eyes
But
on.
I think, you know, I'd like to see the long-term data of it, but we know that there are a whole lot of studies that show that for generations, male students got more attention from teachers in the classroom, right? But then perhaps somewhere along the line, we started becoming cognizant of that and changing that. So maybe this data is more of a reflection of girls showing just how awesome, you know, they can do, as opposed to, you know, the males lagging behind. But I don't know enough of the 20 or 30-year data to show that. But you know, the girls are ahead right now. They're doing better, and that's who we should emulate.
Yeah, no, and just to be clear, I'm not, but it's not really about boys and girls. Yeah, I think it's wonderful that we're seeing that data. I really am speaking specifically to our classroom libraries, and if we have options for the boys to have choice and choose books to read and take home and have that, because interest really does play a part in, especially for our younger readers, right? So it's really just more of that, not necessarily who's doing better, who isn't.
That's a good
thought.
Right,
It's,
yeah, no, I
it's
think,
that.
I think,
Absolutely.
you Google great books for girls in fourth grade and you come up with
Mhm.
1,000.
Yeah.
You have to do that reverse for boys, and I don't think you come up with quite as many.
Right.
Because I think there is a certain, listen, I'm a girl mom. I have every princess, you name it, I got it all. But I think that there is kind of a hole for quote unquote boy books. Not that any book is a gendered book, but
It's interest.
yeah,
It's interest.
It's just
It-
interest,
that
like
hits.
my kid doesn't want to read about baseball, but your son may want to, and that's just,
Yeah, just to address your question, when I got here, when Dr. Sumit Banji was here, when she had her baby, she really she became transformed in a way. And since that date, we've been looking for diverse libraries. We would set aside $500 for each teacher. We did that up through COVID. And we would encourage them teachers individually to look for more diverse books, boy books, books for people of color, et cetera, to try to enrich those libraries. So I think it's a great question and it's something that we can look more into.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Ready for math? Everybody's favorite, right? Here we have the third grade historical, post-COVID. Fourth grade. Nice uptick at the end there on fourth grade. Here's third grade disaggregated. Fourth grade disaggregated. This is Verona versus New Jersey. I do want to point out that the test has 5 scoring bands that kind of go 1, 2, 3, 4. We've merged the 4 and 5 into a single bar because they've met expectations. And you'll see something different with science in a little bit. This would be our current 5th graders and their trajectory through our schools. We've seen sort of historically that 4th grade, it seems to be a little bit more difficult test. I would love to know from the state if that holds true across all the districts or if that's just a Verona thing.
No, it's been like that since the ESPA.
Yeah.
Fourth grade ESPA was always a harder test. I don't know
Right.
why.
The things that we're working on, we're continuing to use Dimensions Math, which focuses on conceptual understanding and modeling, getting to see numbers flexibly, seeing numbers visibly. We've encouraged math games for consolidation. I think finally I'm starting to see other support materials like I have in my office, addition by heart and multiplication by heart, sets of flashcards that are very different than the flashcards that you and I had as a child, which would have an expression on one side and an answer on the other. This is multiple visualizations with either sets of dice spots or bar models or arrays, dot arrays, you name it. And it helps kids connect a visual to a fact and one fact to another fact. The learning science shows that you learn through connection and elaboration more than repetition, although repetition plays a part. We are all busy as a district unpacking standards and improving our learning targets and matching those. And we'll be taking a look at the rest of our test data with a kind of closer lens. Moving on to HB, here's 5th grade's historical. 6th grade historical. 7th grade historical. Now this is just Math 8. In 8th grade, they either take the 8th grade test or they take the Algebra 1 test. And so the graph starts to look different. In seventh grade, they just take the seventh grade test. There's not like a pre-algebra version of seventh grade. So all the kids are together. Here's our Algebra 1 in HB results historically. Math 5 disaggregated. Math 6 disaggregated. Math 7 disaggregated. Math 8. Algebra 1 disaggregated, was that in there? Charlie put the graphs together. We'll track that down. I was expecting something else on this slide.
I was expecting algebra 1 disaggregated.
Yeah, me too. We'll find it. This is our sort of Verona versus New Jersey for both 5th and 6th math. Here's Algebra 1 in the Math 7 and Math 8 and Algebra 1 versus New Jersey. Not necessarily a fair comparison on Algebra 1 because that New Jersey number is everyone who took algebra, whether they're in 8th grade, 9th grade, or some other grade beyond. And this is just HB's Algebra 1. We'll see it again in a minute in VHS. This would be our current 6th graders and their path through NJSLA math. This is our current 7th graders. Notice that there's a split over on the right. Last year, they took either Math 6 or Math 6-7. These are our current 8th graders. Again, you're going to see a couple different groupings there because they either took a sequence of Math 6, 7, and then eventually 8 this year, or they took 6, 7, and 7, 8, and they're in algebra. Our current freshmen, same pattern. What we're working on there at HB is our 4th year of dimensions in 5th grade and our 3rd year of Amplify Math. It's focused on conceptual understanding. It's focused on transferable skills in terms of making sense and collaborating and talking, expressing ideas in math. We've got our win period in 5 and 6 and Math Lab in 7, 8, and we've made some adjustments to those things. And again, we're busy working on unpacking the standards. We're continuing to focus on routines through building thinking classrooms so that kids can collaborate in math, express their ideas, use math as a language, and sort of explain their understanding of math and not just get answers. At the high school, this is Algebra 1 historically. This is geometry historically. I would say honors geometry for the most part, because it's the freshmen who take this now. The Algebra 1 VHS disaggregated results. Oh, that includes, is that everybody? That's everybody. So that's HB and VHS. That's the slide I anticipated. It's not split by school. They don't give us that? Got it. The geometry disaggregated results. This is Algebra 1. It includes the 8th grade Algebra 1 and the VHS Algebra 1, and then geometry versus the state. This is looking at the cohort. There's a lot going on in this slide because of all the different levels and grades and everything else. The kids on the right took math, like pre-algebra at that point is what we called it, is essentially math 7, 8, and then they took algebra 1 and they're in geometry. The kids in the middle took math 7, then math 8, then algebra 1 in our high school. What we're working on here at the high school is the same sorts of stuff. We're in year 3 of Amplify Math. And again, it's about kids understanding conceptually, making sense of math, learning through problem solving, communicating with each other, communicating their understanding. We're planning a little bit of a lesson study with them so that we can look at specific activities and kids making sense of math and kind of digging into classroom level data and observations together as a department. And we're all still unpacking standards and making sure our learning targets are focused towards the test. We're implementing the building thinking classroom strategies. And we've been through the data. I went so far as to pull the frequency of every sort of like evidence statement across 8 tests, just to figure out like, what are they really testing on these tests? State doesn't tell us that. I had to dig it all out. Yeah, they don't do that. This is kind of New Jersey versus the state in math across the 3 different years. Verona's the reddish colors and the state is the bluish colors. I apologize if you're colorblind. So it's going to be hard to discern. All right, on to science. Or do you want to do math questions first? Math questions first? Okay.
So, I must say, oh my God, this is very loud. I am a little concerned because it seems like we are going in the wrong direction on some of those slides, and not just the break between the kids that go accelerated and the kids that don't. It seems like some of the cohorts, either the numbers that have achieved have gone down or they're not increasing. So what are we doing to combat that?
So in a couple cases, we had teachers who were in their first year of teaching a particular subject. We had a teacher for the first time teaching geometry. We're going to dig in on the geometry standards and the sequence and the techniques in that class. Likewise, we had another teacher who was in their first year of teaching 6th grade math, same sort of thing. I've already been in his classroom multiple times this year, looking at how he's approaching problems and getting kids to make sense of the problems. And then making sure that exactly what's happening in the classroom is lining up with how they're being assessed in the end.
This, and I think I brought this up last year, that the kids with 504 plans who are not cognitively impaired, they don't have SLDs, they are consistently lagging behind all grade levels.
Right.
And do we have an idea as to, are there supports these students are not receiving? And is that a problem with our 504 system? Or is there something that we're missing in administering the test even to these students where they are not performing close to at least their peers?
On those follow up on that, on those tests, do they get additional time or ability to function separately?
It depends on their.
If that's in their
it's in
504,
that's in
yes.
their accommodations, they get it on state test as well.
Okay.
So one of the things that I see is certain kids do struggle with math facts and being accurate and efficient in how they develop answers to math facts. And that's sort of what I mentioned before. We're now finally seeing sort of ancillary materials and I don't want to use the word drill, but drill types of materials that support multiple representations. Certain kids have a hard time memorizing math facts by rote. You know, I've met with even parents who are like, yeah, I didn't have my math facts down until I was an adult. And I can bring you samples so you can see what we're looking at. It's multiple different representations that support those kids who struggle with rote memorization so that they can build robust memories around these facts. And even if they can't just recall them by rote, they can reconstruct them. You know, it's the kind of thing like if you consistently forget 6 times 7, but you know 3 times 7, you can rebuild 6 times 7. And it's making sure that the students understand those compensatory strategies, and for as much as I've advocated over time, making sure the teachers understand those compensatory strategies as well. But the materials that we finally found on the market, which didn't exist before, are finally there. And I'm hoping that that starts to close those things.
I have a
I-
quick.
I do think too, just let me, one thing, I mentioned this earlier. Where we saw a huge leap of growth was with our Algebra 1 students last year. They grew 15 percentage points in 1 year. And they did that with targeted Mr. Stevenson and worked with the 2 teachers. They went over evidence statements. They went over each individual student's performance on those assessments, on our MAP assessments, on teacher-made assessments, teacher observation, teacher data tracking. That's where we're going to make those strides. And I jokingly said earlier in the year, it's teaching on purpose, but it's not a joke. It's teaching on purpose every day.
Does that fact, I'm sorry, Ms.
No,
Farrar. Does that also factor into whether the algebra is in 8th grade or 9th grade?
It's actually in the 9th grade algebra, which historically in all school districts, students struggle in 8th grade. You saw the numbers here, you saw the state numbers. 8th grade math is historically difficult for students that don't make it, that are not taking algebra in 8th grade. And then Algebra 1 in 9th grade, historically across the state as well, tends to be a lower achievement rate. But I was so unbelievably impressed with what our teachers did with Mr. Stevenson last year. And it just reinforces, we know what to do. We just have to do it more widespread.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of where my mind was going with the 8th grade when I saw that discrepancy, because my question there is that data telling us a story of the importance of that tier 1 and 2 intervention for the foundational skills? So I think that it's glaring, not only because the content gets harder, but because we're now seeing these 2 groups, this group who needed interventions at an earlier age, and this group who was successful because they're stronger students. So I think that while the content does get harder, and I understand that, it's a glaring.
I mean, I'll share an anecdote. In 2019, I was in an 8th grade class and they were working on slope and calculating slopes and understanding, you know, graphs and what the graph says. And I watched students count on their fingers to multiply in 8th grade. And I kind of pulled some of them aside. I would end up going to their math lab or even their literacy lab at times, and kind of like drilling them with alternative flashcards to try to get them to rebuild these things. I'm like, look, if you're going to progress in math, you have to have that foundation. If you're spending your time thinking about what your answers to multiplication problems are, you're not going to understand it.
Yeah, so I
These
think
graphs,
that's
right.
a great practice for that group, but I
Right.
think as a district, we have
Right.
to ensure that that is happening
And-
across
and-
buildings, across classrooms.
Correct. And that's what I was talking about. Like the things that I used with them were semi self-made. You had to print them, cut them, kid by kid by kid. And now there are things on the markets that mimic that we can just purchase and put in the hands of teachers, put in the hands of students. They can play games with them to sort of demystifies the math. And there's a routine of interleave practice so that you have a chance to forget and remember and re-remember and forget and remember. And that builds solid foundations.
I think too, the other piece that we've been talking about, because most of our teachers didn't learn math the way we're teaching math to kids. So really making sure that we have a strong professional development for how those manipulatives, how those representational flashcards, that stuff that we know will get kids from concrete to representational to abstract,
Right.
ultimately to be able to solve those algorithms without, because they understand the conceptual nature.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, concrete nature of what they're doing. That's gonna take serious, it's not gonna happen overnight. Because we didn't learn that way.
And I think too, I can't speak for the board. I can only obviously speak for myself here, but I think that I would like to see, we talked a little bit, which I'll report out on, but we talked a little bit about this tier 1 and 2 instruction. I'm sorry, intervention in our committee. But I think, only speaking for myself here, I really would like to see some type of plan, because while I understand that it does take time, I think that without a plan, we just kind of keep floating, and we can't keep floating like this because we're going in the wrong direction. So, whether it be, okay, this is our, 4th grade plan, where we're going to start, or our 5th grade, wherever it is, I think that if we have some clear interventions in place for teachers to do in the classrooms, and they're getting the professional development support. I mean, I know, again, myself, or even through Ed Committee, I'd like to really see what that is and where we're going.
Okay.
Thank you.
Science? Science. I don't know why we can't be consistent. Science has 4 buckets instead of 5 buckets. Yeah, the range is 100 to, we think, 300 instead of 650 to 850. The graphs are going to look a little bit different. We merged the top 2 tiers, appropriate understanding and advanced understanding. This is our 5th grade historically. Here's our 8th grade historically. I'll speak to this one specifically. One of our, as we work through the SDC kits in HBW, a lot of our emphasis was to try to make assessments hands-on and a little bit practical and mirror the lessons that they did in class. And that doesn't speak to the test, because the test is about, here's a little bit of reading, here's a graph, here's some data, here's a diagram. Can you connect those? And so what we've set as a PDP goal for the entire HB science department is getting our, as proud and happy as we were with our hands-on practical assessments, into something that looks like that was an oops, right? We thought we were doing the right thing, and definitely not. So we're working on that. Here's the 11th grade historical. Here is 5th grade disaggregated. 8th grade disaggregated. 11th grade disaggregated. Verona versus the state.
Verona versus the world.
All right. All right. We'll start with the state and then take the rest. And then here's the, I'm sorry if you're colorblind, this is Verona versus the state for all the 3s compared to each other. We've now reached the halfway point of this presentation. Joking, that's all. Any questions on science?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
On the science, and it was on one of the earlier science part slides. I forget exactly where I saw it. Maybe right there. It seems that keep it in simple terms, I think it might have been an earlier slide. Regardless, the yellows are going more to the blues over time than to the greens. And to follow up on Ms. Verzala and Ms. Ferrara, is what I'm curious to know is, are some of those math struggles impacting that growth in the science? And if I'm reading that as
If you're looking,
Yes, it's probably more connected to literature.
so the students are going to do the best on the science test are good readers and super confident in their math skills. And then have an analytical component as well, right? I think what we've done in the classroom in science is work on that analytical part, but we haven't necessarily like, here's 3 different pieces of information. Can you integrate it and answer a question about it? Right. And particularly in the 8th grade, I think that's very true because we worked really hard at trying to make our assessments practical and match what we're doing in the classroom. And that missed the mark.
The
Right.
thing
So
with
part of
science, my thing with science is that when you give an assessment, and statewide, the scores are so poor. It shows there's a clear disconnect between the standards the state is saying, here's what you need to be teaching these children, versus what they're actually being assessed at in the state test. So to me, I think that it's impossible to tell what, or very difficult to tell what Verona is doing right or wrong within
Science.
science, because this test is just fundamentally
Flawed.
flawed. It really is, and it's a joke.
Well, I will agree with you. And like Mr. Stevenson, I also was a science supervisor. I served on many state committees to try to improve this test. First of all, it's a bad company.
Yeah.
The test is a bad test. The NGSS, or now the New Jersey Student Learning Standards for Science, are a dream and a nightmare at the same time, right? It's what we all want for students in science. It is almost impossible to recreate what those standards are asking kids to do in K-12 classrooms.
On top of that, like we're being encouraged, and reasonably so, and I support it, to do either problem or solution based science learning activities, and they don't really translate well to a standardized assessment. But I think when we see it work, we see how much better it is than the traditional memorization route. So that's my point on our science test.
The other thing that we know about the science test is the NGSS triangulates I'm not going to go into it, but it triangulates 3 different components of science. This test company has not been able to write a question that assesses whether or not our kids can triangulate.
Yeah, and I did see a national report that said the states that were early testers on the 3-dimensional science NGSS have kind of the worst tests. And New Jersey was amongst the first. I had in mind when this rolled out sort of what happened in the regents in the past, that if you were given a science regents, you actually got a box of materials in the mail, and kids had to perform a lab with the box of materials that came in the mail. Right? Right? True stories. That never happened. Right? And, I remember I was a biology teacher during the end of course biology exam. They released a sum total of 8 multiple choice questions for the entire lifespan of that test. Every year. Right. With every question and every answer.
So to all that point, and not
Just
being
bashing the state now.
as close to the state science test mandates, are there any learnings that we can take from, say, some of the science focused schools, say in Morris County, in Bergen, that how do they navigate this?
Well, I could tell you another component that we're not going to get so much into, because the science test is not a great test, so we don't spend a lot of time talking about the test. We do need to take a better look at our K-8 curriculum with alignment, for standards alignment. Our problem in Verona has always stems back to money. Science materials and kits are very expensive, and we're still kind of using the ones that we've been using that maybe don't align to the new science standards as well.
Right.
And we see, when we look at standards, what we saw in ELA, just from 1 year of looking at standards, you saw those green bars rising. We can do the same thing here. You will see the science scores increase once we get that work done. The problematic piece is that we are working on math and language arts right now, and you can only clobber teachers so much. And I mean clobber in a loving way. It's just unfair to say, oh, and we're gonna take a look at science tomorrow too.
That if we do, especially in that K-8 setting, if we take the time to work on those literacy skills and we take the time to provide that math support, we'll see this start to happen organically because the students will have the skills to attack it. So I think that that's a fair and good place to start.
Well, so
It is the science scores don't impact anything other
Right.
than it's a federal requirement that they sit for the test.
And you could possibly see some of those artifacts in grade 8 and grade 11 when they know the deal. Right, those students aren't terribly motivated to take that test. It ends up at the end of the testing, they're like, all right, one more. So it's not necessarily a fair representation, but our 5th grade scores for the stuff that's not aligned, they're actually a little bit better. I really think here we went a different direction, expecting something different. It's not about looking at the pieces of data the way they have the questions together. So we're kind of looking at that and seeing if we can add that, because data analysis and interpretation is a big piece of the science standards, and that's really what the test is assessing more than anything. I did show Charlie earlier the 3-dimensional nature of the standards. Measurement Incorporated kind of took it like you could pick any science and engineering practice and any DCI and any cross-cutting concept and mush them together in a question. But if you look at the standards, that's not how they're written. The performance expectations are very particular. So there's a whole series of questions. What do we look at? Asking questions and identifying problems. I think there's a total of, at least at the high school level, maybe 8 standards out of all of high school that focus on that. And there was questions after question after question that was asking questions. That's sort of more of it's an important science practice, but within the performance expectations, it's pretty niche. I would love students to be asking scientific questions every single day and driving their learning out of their own curiosity. But that's not what's on this test. There we go. And we're reviewing things. We're looking at the data. And I lied when I said it was just halfway. We're all done.
Ms. Peter, you mind if I ask you one quick follow-up question? So I think this kind of runs parallel to the point Ms. Ferreira brought up, but so like when I go to Barnes and Noble, right? I don't look for a reading level. I go to the sections that interest me and I grab the book. What I've noticed it seems like every school district kind of has their own kind of flexibility as to how far up or down a reader can go as far as the reading levels based on student interest. So where's Verona at, just so I have a better idea?
So it's interesting you raised this. I recently went to a workshop at Rutgers University and we were talking about the new ELA standards in general, but specific to reading level. And the statistic that was really jarring to me, they compared, it was 4th through 6th graders, students that were encouraged to read at their reading level and students that were given grade level text. And those students that were given text that were at their reading level and not grade level specific text encountered, it was something like 3 to 6 million less words per year than their peers who were encountering grade level text. And it is important that students have access to high interest on level text for independent reading. That is so crucial to what we've done for many, many years at our elementary level. It also hinders some students' ability to interact with grade level vocabulary, grade level knowledge building. And that is something that we're really looking at as we explore new programs. How can we ensure that students, while they have time and access to those high interest on level texts, also are encountering grade level texts with whatever scaffolding and support is needed to help them get there. But I do think that that is something important that we continue to push our students to do. It'll help them in vocabulary, in knowledge building, and it'll help them on those science tests where the readings are at grade level.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair answer. I do. And we all know that second grader reading on an L level, that when he reads a book about dinosaurs, all of a sudden he makes all the context clue connections and can figure it out. But then we've also seen the kid kind of jump and bite too much more than they can chew. But it seems that you're saying there is some flexibility, but it's not like a hard stop.
No,
Right.
we have certainly no hard and fast rule across the district. Students can't read outside of their text band. I'd encourage them to try it. Particularly, we know, that classic baseball study that students that is behind in reading can access a higher level text if it's on a high interest topic. Baseball was the topic that researchers used in that particular study. But yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Try that harder text that is at a high interest level and
And
when
you
the
would say that's
supports
the
are
attitude
needed.
across the elementary, you'd say?
I think so,
Good.
yes. And we really do try and focus more on text band rather than level. It gives students a little more flexibility. We know that the texts are band and grouped together based on similar characteristics of text. Those leaps between bands, that second grade leap, right? LMN is really, really challenging to move into that next band. We know that those texts have similar characteristics. And when students can access a lower level text in that band, it helps them to, kind of learn the characteristics and move up to that next band who will also have similar characteristics. So they're able to kind of bridge those gaps more easily when they understand what's expected of them at a higher text band
Thank you
level.
for that very good answer, thorough answer. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just have one general question, and I'm not sure if it's for Superintendent DiGiuseppe, Dr. Miller, or Ms. Kohler. Whoever wants to try, feel free to answer. I really appreciate the efforts that everybody did with this data analysis, and I'm asking more in the spirit of Mr. Waka's question. Looking at all of this through the lens of a parent who is paying god awful high taxes in Verona. If I am a parent with children in, say, third grade in Lanning, another parent with children in HBW, and another parent with a 10th grader at Verona High School, all of this, what is the story that this tells me? How should I feel as a parent with, at each of those grade levels? We talked about the test and all of that, and it's just you throw the data at people and their eyes are going to glaze over. So if I'm a parent at those various grade levels, what does all of this tell me? And it's an unfair question
I'll jump on
related
it
to the
first.
night.
I think we did a lot of specific work last year in ELA. And I think what it should tell you as a parent is you have really good teachers that are making moves to improve our scores after a really tragic pandemic. And I promised this board 2 years ago, we would see an improvement in scores, and we see it. It's 2 years. And we know how to do the work. I think we are going to continue to see those scores rise. And I want to go on record by saying this is not the end all and be all, right? We see growth outside of NJSLA. NJSLA is the only measure we can say we can hold ourselves accountable to our surrounding districts and the state. So it's what we use, and by law, we have to present these slides to you. As a parent, I would be happy that you have a district who has teachers and administrators that are doing the hard work and doing it well. It's hard to see that kind of growth in 1 year.
We encourage parents to take a look at their child's score reports. I do think, very often those score reports come home and, a quick glance is given. And, if the numbers seem to be where we expected them to be, it might be a good job and a pat in the back. But it is important that if the scores are not where you thought they might be, if they're higher than where you anticipated or lower, that you reach out. I know that teachers welcome parents that have concerns and questions, and it is really important that parents feel that they understand what those numbers mean, whether it's NJSLA or MAP growth that comes home 3 times per year. The lovely thing about MAP growth is we do have that benchmark test, and we have time left in the school year to make adjustments if things aren't going the way that a parent hoped or a child hoped. Before this end of the year assessment, sometimes NJSLA feels a little bit like an autopsy, and we're not able to enact change on the spot to help students in the moment. So I do encourage parents to pay attention to those MAP growth results that come home periodically. If things are surprising, to reach out.
And other things that Verona does really well, we are steeped in tradition. We have loving schools and teachers who kids are happy to come to school and enjoy being here. We have caring principals at our schools that do a lot with extracurricular. We do a lot really well here, and if I were a parent here, I'd be happy.
If I can add to that, I live in Rockaway. My kids have gone to Morris Hills and Knowles. And every time I come back from a back to school night there, I'm sorry if they're listening in.
I know what you're gonna say, and right back at you, I was angry.
Yeah, well, not angry. I came back to Verona and wanted to give all my teachers hugs. Right? Like compared to what I saw for my own kids, and we've had a few conversations in my house of bringing various of my kids here. Over, this is year 12, so, I know my Sarah visited, she shadowed kids in 5th grade, right, in HBW for a whole day to try to figure out, like, do I want to come here?
And
Right?
Dr. Miller's daughter did come here.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, quite honestly, things are going to be all right.
Well, and just to be clear, I'm kind of asking the question I asked
Yeah.
as clearly the dumbest guy in the room, but the stories behind these
Yeah.
numbers is what I think, brings that
Right.
excitement and enthusiasm to life.
Yeah.
And I'll just say with the math, what we are doing is right. It's supported by brain research. We're getting kids to think, to question. It's anybody could teach to the test basic facts, but there are a lot of kids who don't learn and remember that way. They just don't. And we want them to encourage them to get into STEM fields. Those are the top fields that are the career. That where they graduate college. So it's definitely different. We could have learned this as kids, but we were not taught that way. Singapore math, they took American ideas and they took those to other countries and showed what we were not bold enough to do. So I would say have patience with math. Did another observation today, and the kids are at the board and they're talking about math. They're out of their seats and they're trying to figure out ratios. And we're trying to help them, but they're also struggling with it. But that's what it takes to learn. You have to be wrong. It's to learn from your mistakes. You have to, and that's what imprints and stays in the back of your mind. So the right ideas there, what you said, Glenn, was right on track. Same thing he did, and that Mr. Giuseppe, you talk about with the algebra. We did the same thing. He's doing that with 6th and 8th. He literally went in and dug up every evidence statement and in the state and matched it to all the questions that are available. The state does not do this. He did it, spent several weeks. Because if I'm a teacher and I get this graph, which we're not allowed to show, we found out from the state, we're not allowed to show this to you at a meeting. It's confidential. A teacher should be able to click on where they got the question wrong, and it should tell them what the questions look like. That's feedback at the teacher level. That's important. So to your point, we are doing that. We're trying to supplement that and blend it in our, I was going to call it illustrative math, but our Amplify math, the questions are the same as we see on the state assessment. What's different on the state assessment is they'll choose the following. And if you get one of those questions wrong out of 3, you get 0 points. In Verona, you may get 3, 4 out of 5. So it's the process that matters. The standardized test, I'd ask, and if the state's listening, and I've told them this because we've had the meetings with the state, you got to give partial credit to kids when they think. We do it with writing. We have to do the same thing with math, and our teachers are doing the right thing. So we just need you to keep believing in them, and we're getting there. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good
Thank you
night.
so
Thank you
much.
for coming out. Moving on to our agenda to committee reports. First up is finance.
Hello, everybody. I guess I'll take it.
Go ahead. A lot of it's
Okay.
on the agenda.
You know, usually I'm after Mr. Cruz, so I just say everything that Mr. Cruz says. But we did meet, God, it was like a week and a half ago now. Just to give you the highlights. Free lunch applications closed on October 15th, but if something changes in your personal situation, please reach out to the school district. We are here to help. We have currently 24 eligible students. We'll see what happens with that later on this year. And then we put in for last year, the state had a budget for menstrual product reimbursements for the middle and high school girls' bathrooms. So we have put in for our reimbursement for this year because it seems to be, we're not quite sure how it's happening, but there's a pool of money. We're putting it in early to try to capture as much funds as we can. So we put in just over $4,000 in reimbursements, which hopefully we will get reimbursed for all of it. The playground update, I always like to do this because I know that parents are always wondering what's going on with the playground. We are still working through mediation. We hope to be able to come to an agreement. All the parties are now in the room, so they can all just point fingers to each other and hopefully someone will cut us a check. That's the hope at the end of this. So, and then for refinancing our public debt, we have been talking about that, and that is coming up in the next few weeks, I believe. When we bonded out in 2015, our debt service for the bond, we're going to refinance that, and it's going to save the taxpayers almost $620,000. Like Mr. Cruz over the next over the next 7 years. So thank you for that, and I think that is it, unless there's anything else.
Just, yeah, should we share why or the benefits of the Red Rover, time tracking thing? It's not, as glamorous as the, savings that we're getting from the,
Yeah, well, it's a new system for tracking time for subs and other part-time workers. Yes, and it automatically generates time cards and invoices and stuff like that, which will help streamline all these processes, which when you streamline it, you spend less people time on it. And that means there's people time for other things.
Our payroll supervisor tonight was by hand calculating all of the timesheets that for our time clock that we use currently. This will streamline. It'll pull right in from Red Rover into payroll.
And although she is very conscientious, everyone's a human, and every now and then a 5 looks like a 6 or something, 7 looks like a 9, and you end up with a mistake. So this will help prevent those type of little things.
Thank you. Any questions? Moving on to education. Where?
Very robust conversation about education. So much of what we talked about, we did come up in ed committee. And Ms. Kohler, thank you. They also came up with the MTSS training and the tier 1. So thank you. I think the only thing that we did speak about that is important to note, I know we're all really proud of our life skills program that we started in the high school. And they're doing some really wonderful work. Right now it's in full swing. They've been able to do the CDI trips. They're working on their job skills. And also there are trainings that are beginning in the middle school as their feeder program for the high school. So I think that kudos to Ms. Simmons and Ms. Kohler for the work that they're doing to ensure that our students have the opportunity in this life skill program, and that we're really being that there's an intent behind having that feeder program in middle school. So I think that everything else we kind of touched upon. It was just, that was something I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Anyone have any questions? Mr. Walker, any questions? No? Okay, good. Moving on to our agenda for public comments on agenda action items. Anything that we will be voting for? If you have anything you would like to say, please come to the podium, and you have 3 minutes, and just state your name. Seeing none. Moving on to discussion items, new business or old business. Does anyone have anything to bring? No.
I know there's a lot today. I'm sorry. So I know,
No.
I just, first, I think that we have SCA liaisons here. Is that right? Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's great and I appreciate it very much. I think we all do, again.
Mhm.
I want to just kind of thinking ahead budgetarily because we're in approaching budget season. I wanted to just kind of bring up this subject again, and it's really just to kind of start the conversation about what our options are with respect to security grants from the state, because I know that the deadlines are, I believe, early in the new year, right? So we have some time, but I just wanted to kind of bring that up so that we can maybe look ahead at some of the security grants.
So right now, there are 0.
Right.
Right.
But
I get an email that gives me all the
Okay.
security grants. There were 14 of them and I went to every single one and it said this grant is no longer open. Why they send the email out, I don't know.
okay, so there's nothing right now.
No.
Okay, so we'll just maybe like, okay, so we'll see what happens with that.
Does that change, or if it's not open now, it's not gonna open in a month from now?
You know what? I don't know.
I
Um,
think it's just kind of like, right? like
It's just they're done.
staying on-
Th-
yeah,
Yeah, if new ones come up, we'll get notified
kind
of
of-
them, but
yeah.
anything that was available. And I don't know when it was available because I get a monthly email and it's just always says the same thing.
Yeah.
No longer available.
And then also just again, as we're thinking about the budget, you know, to kind of think about what are our options? So what are our options for, you know, possibly having either a security guard, a monitor, it doesn't matter what we call them, but someone who is, or a group of people, whatever we decide, like in the schools, looking at the cameras, ensuring that, you know, that we just have those extra hands and eyes on deck. So really, I think before anything, we have to see like, what are our options budgetarily for this? Whether it's in our budget, whether it's a referendum, I really don't know, but I just want to have those conversations and start to really see what we can do for the next school year.
And I just wanted to, report out that the board as a whole and Ms. Giuseppe and Mr. Cruz did attend the New Jersey School Boards Convention. I want to thank Ms. Prisco, Mr. Giuseppe, and Mr. Cruz for supporting the entire board going. It is really nice when the whole board goes because we can, in many ways, we divide and conquer a bit, and we all went to different seminars. There was a couple, we all saw Mr. Waka present and he had a great presentation. And while we were there, we learned a little bit about ethics, because the presentation in the room before, next to us was also being broadcast into our room. So that was interesting. But I personally went to a bunch of really interesting presentations, and one that spoke to me was on middle school law, which sounds kind of weird, but it was a lot about HIB versus code of conduct. And the gentleman who presented, Jonathan Bush, is the founder of Bush Law Group, which is a very large and popular school board attorney group. And one of the things that I took away from it, and you know, I know this a little bit, but you know, just because something is not declared an HIB, because it doesn't meet those criteria, doesn't mean that it was right. Doesn't mean that the students involved were not disciplined or counseled or otherwise remediated. You know, it just means that it didn't fall into this fairly narrow definition of what an HIB is. So, you know, I think, you know, I see it in my professional life. I've seen it in my personal life. Sometimes we just get caught up into, well, why isn't it an HIB? Well, does it matter if it's an HIB versus a code of conduct? And often it doesn't. So that was good. And the other one that I went to right at the end actually was something called Support Our Superintendent, which was also very interesting and made me mindful of some things about communication and making sure that our superintendent is not on call 24/7, because she does need and deserve to have her own life outside of.
As boring as it is.
Listen, I need some bread. So,
Yeah, make
and
my
we-
bread.
And we did see two excellent speakers, John Quinones from What Would You Do? He was great. If you ever get a chance to see him speak, his life story is amazing. He was a migrant farm worker in high school. Like, it just blows my mind that this man has come from, seemingly nothing to this absolute wonderful human. And then we also saw Maria from Sesame
Sonia
Street.
Manzino, Manzano.
Sonia
Yes,
Sonia
Sonia
Manzano.
Manzano.
She's gonna be Maria. She will
Yeah.
be Maria. From the time I was this until now. But they were both excellent speakers. If anyone ever gets a chance to attend, it is a nice
Indeed.
couple days down in Atlantic City.
I agree. It was great to be all together. And like you said, the keynote speakers this year both of them were just wonderful. So it was great to be there. I did also attend a couple of interesting classes. I got down there on Monday to attend the security one and some interesting information as well. And again, with what Mrs. Ferrara said, it's really, we need to start the discussions as the funding is really our main goal, because I think we're all on board with figuring out what we need in each school building, more cameras, better visibility on the cameras in and out, outside of the buildings. And somebody that's actually physically watching the monitors daily, closely, not just the school secretary that is responsible for, seeing what's going on when she's doing a million other things. So, but the funding is really our biggest concern, and how is that going to happen? Like, where, if that's, a referendum, could we go out for a special vote at another time? I mean, that was brought up, somebody discussed it at one of the sessions or we were at, somebody was talking about doing a special meeting, special vote. So just kind of getting a price tag and figuring out where we go from that is, I think, our top, we really got to start focusing on that. And I wanted to also give my condolences to the crossing guard passed away from the corner of Sampson and Grove Avenue, Mr. Sal. So I want to give my condolences to his family. I think he just passed yesterday. So, and to the FN Brown community and any of the students from the high school that would cross over by him. He was very well loved, and I saw flowers there today when I was coming up onto Sampson. So Mr. Sal, Rosamelli and his family here, and my thoughts and prayers. And I think that's all
I just wanted to
Mhm.
tack on real quick, and I'm sorry for the loss. I can't tell you how many times I've driven down there after dropping my kids off at high school and always friendly with a wave. So it's terrible. So yes, condolences. I just wanted to add to Ms. Rosala's conference update. I did see a wonderful conference or discussion on the implementation of AI in the school system. I shared you what I was able to see, and just the main takeaway is there's no formula. It's still the Wild West, of course, but what my takeaway was, some of the successful schools do is they allow the teachers the freedom to experiment. I think it was something that Dr. Miller said is not, from a student's learning aspect, is not to be afraid to fail, that some of the implementation, the use of AI is experimental, and that's okay. Things are going to get a little messy with it, but to go into the approach and the implementation of AI with eyes wide open, knowing that what we do today is going to be different 6 months from now. And I think that that is an excellent opportunity for a learning environment. What's on that?
And we take the position here in Verona is generative AI is going to be ubiquitous really quickly. And so rather than say, don't use it, this is how you should use it. And we're teaching our students to responsibly use it. So I do want to just say one thing before I forget. Mrs. Rosella, as a result of a similar workshop that I went to on HIB, last year we revised our HIB letters. So they now will say the district did not find evidence that your child committed an act of harassment, intimidation, bullying. Although no evidence was found, it indicates that it was a violation of code of conduct. So it clarifies for parents, just because it wasn't HIB doesn't mean it wasn't something else. I mean, there's obviously unsubstantiated in total, but so we actually changed our letter with help from Mr. Trent.
say thank you to you because I think we were, I don't want to say one of the first, but we were the first to adopt. We were the first.
We were the first, Dr. Hughes and Kreskill
Okay.
adopted, but our board meeting was first. But we
Okay,
wrote it
so
together.
kept-
We
so
wrote it
To
together.
adopt a policy around AI
Yeah.
in Verona. So that was ahead of
Strauss
ahead of the
Esme
time,
just came out with their
but
sample
we
policy.
did it.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
So, thank you.
Anything for correspondence? No. Moving on to our resolutions. For personnel, please, I need a motion to approve resolutions A1 through A8.
Moved.
Motion by Mr. Waka,
Second.
second by Mr. Boone. Are there any discussions?
Can I just ask a question about A5? Is that for work that she did last year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So she submitted 2 sets of invoices and because we still use paper invoices, which I hope we're not going to be much longer, we don't know what happened to them, but she was not paid.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you. Mr. Cruz, if you could please call roll.
Mr. Walker,
Yes, and congrats to Ms. Solomon on retirement.
Yes. Mhm.
Mrs. Frizella,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrar,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mr. Boone.
Yes, and I want to echo also Mr. Walker's congratulations.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Moving on to our education, I need a motion to approve resolutions B1 through B9.
Moved.
Motion by Mr. Waka.
Through B10.
Oh.
Move that too.
B10? Really?
I have a
I have
B10.
B10.
You have a B?
Revised.
I know, I have the revised one.
Therapy solution.
Yes, CLL
Okay.
therapy.
B10, sorry,
It's under the chart.
B10,
I'll second.
seconded by, it was motioned by Mr. Waka, seconded by Mrs. Farrar. Are there any discussions? Mr. Cruz, if you could please call roll.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mrs. Frizella,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrar,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Moving on to athletics and co-curricular, I need a motion to approve resolution C1 through C3.
I'll move it.
Motion by Mr. Waka, seconded by
I'll second.
Mrs. Rosella. Are there any discussions? Mr. Cruz, if you could please call roll.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mrs. Frizella,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrar,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. There's nothing for facilities. Moving on to our finance, I need a motion to approve resolutions E1 through E7.
Sure. So
Motion by Mr. Waka, seconded by Mrs.
second.
Rosella. Any discussion? Mr. Cruz, if you could please call roll.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mrs. Frizella,
Yes. Yes.
Mrs.
sorry.
Farrar,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our governance and policy, I need a motion to approve resolutions F1 through F2.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Boone, seconded by
I'll second.
Mrs. Ferrer. Are there any discussions?
I just want to point out that this is the first year in many, many years that we did not have a single HIB investigation until the end of October.
We don't
You
discuss
get
it.
2 days.
We have Halloween, don't forget. We do.
Halloween's
We have
coming.
Halloween,
No,
don't
no, I mean,
forget.
we normally start right away in September.
Yeah.
And so good things,
Yeah. Good things.
good things.
Good things.
Mr. Cruz, if you could please call roll.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mrs. Frizella,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrar,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our agenda to public comments. If you have any thing you'd like to speak on, please come to the podium and state your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Carla Buglione, and I wanted to make everyone aware of an incident that occurred last week at Lanning with my son. I do want to start by saying everything is okay, and I'm very fortunate to have the principal be so communicative. So last week on Wednesday, October 23rd, Principal Freund of Lanning Avenue called me to make me aware of an incident that involved the safety of my son during recess. My son Luca is an LSS student in kindergarten, which is the special education class, and he ran away from the recess area, thinking the older children who were playing on the baseball field would follow him and chase him playfully. This is adjacent to the Lanning Avenue playground. The incident can happen to any child, of course, but the likelihood of a special needs child running away is much higher. Why? The proper terminology is actually called elopement. And for children with autism spectrum disorder, that means, and my son has that diagnosis, that means they can run away at a moment's notice for any reason. And so from what I heard, Luca ended up very far away from the recess area, closer to Elk Road, and it took a teacher who was driving in at the time to stop and help catch him. Again, I want to say, thank God this was not a bigger incident, but I'm really here to make everyone aware of the safety issue that's at hand. The Lanning Avenue playground has 2 open areas where any kid, not just a special needs child, could run away either to Elk Road or on the side of the school to Lanning Road. I communicated my concerns to Principal Freund, and again, thank you to him for such prompt response. He mentioned that he did put parameters in place, and Ms. Kohler, who is here, can attest that at recess, they made sure there were extra personnel in the corners of the open area, which is fantastic. However, it's not a long-term solution. And so on October 28th, which was yesterday, I emailed Principal again just to check in on where things were. And he said that he made the grounds department aware, and someone actually came out to look at potentially putting a fence in place. And so again, all positive, trending in the right direction, but I'm here tonight as a parent of a special needs child who was obviously worried, grateful that this was not an incident, a lawsuit, a death, or anything like that. However, wanted to make everyone aware. There were other parents who were also made aware, particularly in the LSS community, Roxanne Torado, Jenny Chow, Kerry Walden, and Claire Gowdy, who all gave me permission to share their name and their overall concern for the playground and the lack of the fence. So if Lanning is going to be the hub for special education, adding a fence to the perimeter of the playground is definitely a need. Happy to do a fundraiser with these moms. Again, I am thankful that nothing serious happened, but I did need to make everyone aware here on the board. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carla.
Do we do elopement drills?
Yes.
At Lanning? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this was a different situation. He had a second crisis happening in the building, so personnel were pulled. Yeah. No, definitely, we do.
Right, at our next P and G meeting, can we just get an update on that?
Mhm.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come up, speak? Seeing none. Our next public meeting will be held on November 12th, 2024, beginning with confidential session at 6 p.m., public session at 7 p.m. in the Verona High School Learning Commons. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Boone, seconded by all in favor.
Hi.
Aye. And it is 8:45 and we are adjourning our meeting. Everyone have a wonderful evening and thank you for being here tonight.